This video was made possible by the people who support me on Patreon. With mounting pressure from high-ranking military officials and violent protests from far-right groups, Evo Morales resigned as president of Bolivia on November 10, 2019. It was a crushing blow for Morales, his followers, and to the democratic systems of Bolivia. Soon after Morales was forced from office, a far-right anti-indigenous senator rose to power and precipitated one of the bloodiest and most repressive months in the last 40 years of Bolivian history. At its most simple, what took place on November 10th was a coup. But a year later, the Bolivian populace defied this power grab and delivered a landslide presidential victory to Evo Morales' protege, Luis Arce. Bolivia rejoiced at the return of MAS, Morales' socialist party. In under a year, Bolivia went from this to this. But this is not the story of Morales' rise and fall. Instead, this is the story of what Evo Morales did and didn't accomplish in office, what Bolivia's form of socialism can and can't offer to climate action, and what lessons we can learn from the complex reality of Bolivia's environmental choices. In a wave of mass support, Evo Morales, an indigenous coca farmer turned union organizer turned politician, swept into power in 2006. From the onset, Morales and his political party, MAS, carved out an indigenous socialism that starkly countered the neoliberal capitalist agendas of previous presidents. With the mantle of the presidency on his shoulders, Morales set to work. He filled his first cabinet with indigenous leaders, broke free from the grips of the World Bank, and poured Bolivia's wealth into direct payments, pensions, literacy programs, education, and infrastructure development. His agenda worked. When Morales took office, Bolivia was South America's poorest nation. Just 2 years later, in the depths of the global financial crisis, Bolivia enjoyed one of the highest levels of economic growth of any country. More importantly, the percentage of people in poverty dropped by half, literacy rates continued to decline, and infant mortality rate was halved. In short, Morales' socialist-informed development policies seemed to have worked during his presidency. But Morales, alongside being an anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist, was also a vocal environmental advocate. It's here, in both his words and actions, that we might be able to glimpse some insight into what a transitional socialist nation could mean for climate change and environmental policy. When Evo Morales set out to redistribute Bolivia's wealth to the people, he did it on the back of one of Bolivia's biggest industries, fossil fuels. In order to fund his literacy, education, healthcare, and infrastructure programs, Morales essentially nationalized Bolivia's hydrocarbon industry. He raised taxes on private gas companies from 18% to 81%, with the expressed interest of then delivering those profits to the people via direct payments or social programs. Under Morales, Bolivia also passed a law recognizing Mother Earth, or Pachamama, as sacred.
The Mother Earth Law holds the land as sacred and defines it as a living system with rights to be protected from exploitation.
As well as invested $8.7 million in reforestation efforts from 2012 to 2015. And in 2019, when forest fires were raging throughout Bolivia, Evo Morales was on the front lines, literally beating back the inferno. Throughout his 13-year presidency, Morales also solidified his climate and environmental justice advocacy on the world stage during UN climate conferences.
Our Mother Earth. She is treated as if she were a thing without life.
As well as organized the 2010 World People's Conference on Climate Change that brought together both social movement leaders and politicians from over 100 different countries in order to craft an ambitious global climate agenda that addressed climate debt, colonialism, and imperialism. In short, Morales attempted the Herculean task of simultaneously bringing wealth to the Bolivian people while also trying to take just environmental action. He definitely succeeded in some areas, but he also failed in others. Outside the World People's Conference on Climate Change in 2010, there was a group of unhappy protesters. They were calling on Morales to take domestic action on environmental destruction. Morales inside, with leaders and organizers from across Bolivia and the world, and indigenous protesters outside, decrying Morales' recent environmental failures. Failures that include increased deforestation during his presidency, continued reliance on fossil fuel extraction, and proposed megadams on 2 of Bolivia's waterways. This is the complicated reality of Morales' environmental record. He champions the rights of Earth and challenges the destructive practices of capitalist countries like the US on the world stage, while simultaneously greenlighting projects like the 190-mile highway in 2011 that would run through a number of indigenous lands in Tipnis and would require the clear-cutting of swaths of primary forests. This project epitomizes the struggle of the Morales administration. On the one hand, Evo Morales tried and, for the most part, succeeded in reducing inequality by transferring the wealth created by extractivist industries like oil, gas, and lithium into the hands of Bolivia's population. But this short-term solution meant sacrificing some of his original environmental goals and standards. The Tipnis Highway is meant to traverse the gap between a Brazilian highway and one leading towards Cochabamba, and ultimately to maritime ports. The highway would connect agricultural land to commercial and industrial sites, and according to the Bolivian government, would lead to a stronger economy. But due to protests and pressure from certain Tipnis indigenous communities, the project was halted in 2011 with an intangibles law that protected the area. Opinions of the highway were mixed, however. Some local residents saw it as a way to better sell their crops and develop a better future.
Porque la intangible nos cierra todo, como si nos hubiera cortado las manos para que no hagamos nada, que no saquemos nuestros productos, no podamos.
So after a consultation process with local residents and industrial interest, Mas repealed the 2011 Intangibles Law in 2017 and started planning the highway anew. The Tipnis Highway project sums up the Bolivian struggle. It reveals a much larger problem at hand in Bolivia and for many other post-colonial countries. In order to bring prosperity to their lands, they have to, at least in the short term, participate in a global capitalist economy reliant on extraction. Morales by no means had an easy path ahead of him when he assumed the presidency in 2006. The history of Bolivia is marred with colonialism, anti-indigenous violence, and extractive corporations like silver companies and fossil fuel multinationals that sought to swoop in, grab resources, and sell them elsewhere, leaving Bolivia little but pollution and decimated landscapes. Unfortunately, what Bolivia does right now is shaped by hundreds of years of colonial extractivism. Its industries and infrastructure were all built in order to fuel the corporate juggernauts of the global north. As a result, if Bolivia does want to transform the quality of life of its people, it has to participate in the system that created it, at least in the short term. So I think it's dangerous to critique the methods that Morales used to redistribute wealth and access to the Bolivian people, at least from an environmental standpoint. Bolivia must be seen as a transitional state. It's trying to rapidly lift people's quality of living with the tools it was given. Tools cobbled together from the scraps of colonial extractivist rule. Tools that, unfortunately, have outsized environmental impacts. But remember, the global north is responsible for 92% of global historical emissions. The US military alone emits more than 100 countries combined. Bolivia, on the other hand, is responsible for 0.03% of the world's emissions. And in most cases, those emissions stem from industries working to satiate the appetite of the global north. Evo Morales' socialist Bolivia is a complicated case study full of environmental contradictions. At their core, I think these contradictions stem from the struggle inherent in participating in extractive industries to better the situation of his people. Morales, throughout his presidency, was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Bolivia's specific circumstances meant Morales often had to choose between raising the quality of life for his people or staying true to his environmental beliefs. In the US and other countries of the global north, which have enjoyed immense wealth, fossil fuels, and consumption for hundreds of years, that choice doesn't exist. They've already blown past their fossil fuel budgets. It's their responsibility then to quickly transition to zero carbon, low consuming economies. Socialism could be a just and effective way to get that done. But after watching and researching the presidency of Evo Morales, one thing is clear to me. Socialism, while certainly less harmful than capitalism, does not eliminate environmental destruction. In order to create an eco-socialist reality, global socialist agendas need to foreground climate change and degrowth ideas. Part of this is developing degrowth strategies. Part of this is employing smart design and effective renewable infrastructure, and part of this means redefining the good life. One paper models that it's possible for rich countries like the US to contract their consumption rates by as much as 95% while still maintaining a high quality of life that includes universal healthcare, air-conditioned homes, and computers. Essentially, growth does not have to happen in rich countries for people to live well. At the end of the day, the global north quite literally poured gasoline on the fire of climate change. It's their responsibility then to put it out. So while this does mean dealing with their own emissions at home, it also means developing a global climate reparation plan for countries that have contributed little to climate change, yet will experience the brunt of its force. Hey everyone, Charlie here. If you've been watching Our Changing Climate for a while, or just stumbled across this video and are wondering how you can help me make more videos, then consider supporting the show on Patreon. As an OCC patron, you'll gain early access to videos, special behind-the-scenes updates, as well as a members-only group chat. In addition, each month my supporters vote on an environmental group that I then donate a portion of my monthly revenue to. So if you want to support the channel or are feeling generous, head over to patreon.com/ourchangingclimate and become an OCC patron. If for whatever reason you're not interested or aren't financially able to, then no worries. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in 2 weeks.